was that was purple.
Oh, yeah, you know.
The lights were out the last time.
Oh, yeah, they were. It is daytime right now. I wasn't thinking about it. So, guys, I'm sorry. If it sounds like we're stalling, it's because we are. This is how we do things. Every month when we come up with the theme of the month, Janae picks 5 movies. I pick 5 movies. We make a grand list of the 5 movies that we're going to do for the month. 5 or 4, depending on how the month goes. I picked The Good Son. I never seen the movie, but on like these little Watch Mojo and Looper and whatever, What Culture, on these little countdowns, I will always see these movies under like evil kid categories.
I mean, he was more so deranged than
Point is, I thought it was a horror movie, so that's why I added it on the list. I never seen it. And you know, here we try to what am I trying to say? Expand our palette. We're not just gonna be watching Freddy, Jason, and Michael movies, even though I love Freddy, but we have to expand our taste.
Myers fans.
You say you a what?
Mikael.
Oh. I mean, that's cool. We'll get there when we get there. I actually didn't know that about you, and I wasn't expecting you to say that.
Love Michael Myers?
Yeah.
Man.
I didn't know that.
That's my man.
I really didn't know that.
Why you think I always posted Michael at the first?
I never put that together. That makes a lot of sense now.
Like, Freddy Krueger is
that
cool,
makes a lot,
but I don't like anything that can attack you in your dreams.
I think that's so interesting. It's so mysterious.
There's too many things. I'm not talking about this offline,
right.
But there's too many things with the whole dream thing that
look at you. She's tearing up. Y'all can't.
I can't. But Michael Myers, he's a real life tangible object, so I can deal with Michael. That's my man. And he never run nowhere.
I can't wait until we get into those. So we're going to talk about The Good Son today. The Good Son is a 1993 psychological thriller directed by Joshua Rubin. We shouldn't have picked this movie. It's not bad.
It's
not
We're
bad.
Still gonna do the episode.
It's not bad. It's just not as scary. Or it's a thriller.
We'll talk about it.
It's a thriller.
Because he didn't give me what I needed.
Yeah. So the story is about a young boy named Mark who loses his mom, and basically his dad has to go out on a business trip. He goes to his cousin's house, and it's a nice little kiddie ride from there. So yeah, it's just like, I don't know, maybe the marketing for this movie, because as I said, when I was doing research for the movie, it wasn't like I found too much on it. Basically, if it wasn't on Wikipedia, and it was like a few videos on YouTube, but it wasn't a lot. So the release date was on September 24th, 1993. The runtime comes in at 86 minutes. The budget was The budget was $17 million, and it made $60.6 million back. Where did this $17 million go? Just to pay for the names? I don't know. Maybe it went to all those posters. Anyway,
I don't know if you guys know how movies are made, but just because it was produced in, let's say, 1993, doesn't mean that the script was written in like 92.
Right.
Sometimes scripts have been written years in advance. Mm-hmm. And so this particular script set in like what they call development hell for years. Mm-hmm. So it had a number of failed attempts to get into production. And so Home Alone and Silence of the Lambs are the reason why it finally got made. Because it gave the studio confidence, 20th Century Fox, it gave that studio confidence that an adult-oriented film featuring a child could be successful. But then Macaulay Culkin's father told 20th Century Fox that his son wouldn't do Home Alone 2 unless they cast him in The Good Son.
So they kind of like just had to.
Yeah.
I mean, shit, you better ride for your kids. I know that's right.
And Macaulay and Elijah both got stunt training for the film.
Yeah, I do like that
he was generally dropped 30 feet off that ledge. That was actually him doing it instead of a stunt double.
Oh, wow. Get your coin, Macaulay.
His parents agreed that he would be dropped from 30 feet off the cliff while attached to a cable.
Oh, wow.
The only requirement was that he was given a BB gun once that shot was completed.
Okay. You know what? I would have been like, slap me a check. And, well, I guess that was already coming.
Oh, and then some critics felt that his presence made the film into an unintended comedy, which is what I was kind of getting.
Yeah, it's just
like some parts.
It's some like you said, after you've seen Home Alone and the way he goes about talking to the criminals, it kind of gives you that same vibe. Like he's just playing being evil.
Yeah, but then also there was a novel that was released too at the same time that the movie was released. And so that novel went into more detail about Henry's condition, revealing that he was born a sociopath and can only feel emotions when he tormented others.
Oh, see, like, I would have wanted to see that good son. Janae, if you will, do you want to head to the loading dock with me to get ready for this little kiddie ride here?
Sure.
All right, let's go.
Howdy, survivors. Please keep your tits and limbs inside the vehicle and remain seated at all times. Hang on to your personal belongings, especially your minds and spines. 'Cause this here's a doozy.
Hey, Janae. I got a question for you, girl.
Uh-oh.
So in The Good Son, we see that Mark comes over his cousin's house. He's going to be staying with his aunt and uncle for 2 weeks. And you would think that, when you go over your cousin's house, it's about to be a movie. It's about to be lit.
That's what I was totally about to say. Like, when you go to your cousin's house, it's supposed to be a good time.
Yeah, but no, this is not a good time. I know. So my question to you is, have you ever had a situation, and it doesn't have to be family, have you ever had a good son situation without the murder? Without the psychotic stuff?
I want to say yes.
I have. I could tell my story while you think.
Okay.
Okay, y'all, because I had to get this off my chest as I was coming up with this question.
Because I said you look like you ready to say whatever's on your mind.
Because I got some things on my mind when I was watching this movie. Now, like I said, it has nothing to do with murder, but it is my cousin, though. So my older cousin, am I the youngest? I think out of my section of the family, y'all know how families go, I think I'm the youngest cousin before it gets to like my nieces and nephews. Does that make sense? So I'm looking at the mic like I'm looking at a camera or something. Anyway, I went over my auntie's house as I would per usual, kind of after I was a little bit too old to have a nanny. So I was probably like 5, 6. I don't know. I have an older cousin. He was probably 8, 9, maybe. He's older than me. So clearly he's at that no better age. But if it comes down to it, if they leave us in charge, obviously he's in charge. He has 2 older sisters. They're teenagers, so they don't want anything to do with us. They let us do whatever we want to do. So we're down in the basement, and I can't remember what I was doing. I was doing something, and I'm looking at him, and he's like screwing holes in the wall. Yeah, like it's so the basement is like a cement basement. Like, you know how it was like it.
So most homes in the 90s,
late 90s, that's why I was like, it was late 90s.
Had cement basements.
Yeah, so it was like that concrete wall, and he's like drilling holes in the wall, and I'm like, what the heck are you doing? And he was like, I don't even know how he got me to do it, but I literally did one little small one. And he's like,
where did he get the drill from?
I don't know. That's what I'm saying. Like, I can't remember. I can't recall how exactly I ended up doing it with him. But like I said, I'm 3 years younger than him, so he could have said anything to me, because this is kind of how our relationship was. It was always him getting me in trouble doing something. Like, I hated going over there because I would opt to sit with my aunt and watch stories with her cats than play with him.
Not the cats.
Yeah, no, I would rather do that than play with him. I did not like playing with him. I hated it. Like, he wasn't, like I said, it wasn't like this situation. And I will say this movie reminded me of that. So it was cool in that point. But no. Johnny, I don't know if you got a story, but I answered your question for you, girl.
Okay, so I got
in trouble that day, too. I'm not over it.
Because I mean, like, you drilled a hole in the wall.
No. The thing is, I got in the same amount of trouble that he did, and I feel like I shouldn't have gotten in that much trouble.
Okay.
The hole,
but you still did it, so no.
The hole that I made, and I'm not even lying to you, the hole that I made was probably smaller than,
like one of those little chains.
Yeah. way smaller than this. The hole that he made was like that. And it was 3 of them big boys.
So, for reference, the hole that he made was like the size of a quarter.
Yeah. The hole that I made was the size of like a push pin needle. Yeah, a thumbtack hole. Like. Okay, I'm sorry.
Okay, so I have a story that landed with me in the hospital.
What?
Yes. So it's more like a framing than like, okay, so I'm just gonna explain. Yeah. So I don't have any first cousins.
Really?
Yeah, okay. I don't have first cousins. Okay. So my cousins are more like second, third, fourth, all that. So weird. My great grandmother lived in DC, and all of her children, well, most of her children, lived within the same block. Yeah. So when my mom would go to work, or my nana would be at work, I would go stay with one of her sisters, and she would babysit me and my cousins or whatever. So she had a paddle with our names and faces on it. What? Yes, real old school. So I don't remember how old I was, but I think maybe like 2 or 3, and she's babysitting all of us. Now, my cousin, he's like maybe 6 or 7 at this point. He flushes my great aunt's heart pills down the toilet.
How did he do that?
I don't know. But you know what he did?
He blamed you?
No, he lied and said that I swallowed them.
Whoa!
So they rushed me to the hospital, and I had to get my stomach pumped. For no reason.
For no reason.
Because he lied and said...
Did you tell him?
I don't know how old I was.
Oh, gotcha.
I really don't know how old I was. He flushed them. I mean, he came forward and told the truth maybe like later on. Okay. That day or that week or whatever. Because my great aunt was so scared because she was like, oh my God, I don't know if she swallowed my heart pills. Because they were all empty. You know, the pill pack just sits on the dining room table. Right. Yeah, so I don't know why he flushed her heart pills. And why he said that I ate them.
He must have seen that like on TV or
but
something.
I got
I don't know why I'm trying to defend him.
You know this one? Great big gobs of greasy, grimy gopher gut, mutilated monkey meat, chocolate little piggy feet, French fried eyeballs swimming in a pool of blood. That sure tastes good.
Henry, come on down here. Behind his smile lies a secret.
Here, I made 2 of them, so we could be brothers. Hey, Mark, come on, let's go. Where are we going?
Behind his eyes lies a plan.
Who is he? Mr. Highway. Wow. What are you gonna do with it?
And behind the image of a good son.
Coming?
So what are you guys up to out there?
Sorry, Mom. Top secret. Where are we going? We're here.
Lies the terrifying truth.
Say goodbye. Do you know what you did? You could have killed people. I feel sorry for you. You just don't know how to have fun. What? You're a doctor. You know things.
Well, some things.
What if there was this boy? And he did these terrible things because he liked doing them. Such a sweet little thing. It'd be too bad if something were to happen to her. Wouldn't you say he was evil?
I don't believe in evil.
You should.
When innocence is just a mask.
Do you really think I'd hurt her? You wouldn't. You are Mark. So violent.
When trust becomes a weapon, then anyone can become the next victim.
Henry. No! Susan! If I let you go, you think you could fly?
Macaulay Culkin, the good son.
So the funny thing is, sometimes I would say their character and sometimes I would say their real name.
That's fine. I feel like that's going to happen.
Because I couldn't remember.
We open a movie, it's a shot, it's a wide open shot, and it's pretty cool, but it gives you ultimate 90s vibe.
Yeah, and that's the first thing I wrote in my notes.
It gives you ultimate 90s. And when you really focus in, you see a character, which we come to see as our main character, Mark Evans, played by Elijah Wood, as a kid. And it's crazy.
He is such a cute kid.
I know, but I was doing a little research on what little research I could find on this movie. And somebody said, how does he look older than he does in The Lord of the Rings?
Yo, I actually mentioned that some of his faces that he was making was giving me Frodo vibes. He really did look...
After we get our little nostalgic tease, we cut to a soccer game. And it seems like the team was doing well. I was getting into it or whatever. But then I believe that this is... I was about to say Elijah's. And I actually wrote it. I said Elijah.
I have Elijah and Macaulay all through my notes.
Okay, so just understand that if we ever say Henry, Mike, Elijah, Macaulay, sorry. Didn't mean to. Anyway. So Mark is like staring off during the game, like the ball's in play, and we see that like he's staring at his dad. And you know, we don't know what's going on quite yet because the movie just started like 2 minutes ago. So who knows what's going on. We then cut to a scene of them like going into the hospital where we find out that his mom is dying. I believe she has cancer, I think. Because they seem to bring it up a lot, but I'm not sure. It wasn't...
I don't know. I couldn't hear that part. I turned up my TV so loud because I was like, why
the only thing I caught from that part is he was comforting her, as you would when you go visit somebody in the hospital. And she basically was telling him that he needs to let her go because she'll always be with him anytime he needs her. Basically was what he was saying before she goes ahead. Before she passes on. So the next scene is the funeral. But at first I was lost.
I have a question though. So here's the thing. He was like, don't die, I won't let you die. Did she die right there?
Okay, so I feel like I don't think she died right there because I was expecting the same thing because she was still breathing.
But then it looked like she stopped and then the camera panned out. But she wasn't hooked up into any machines or anything.
Right. So I'm not sure. I don't know if she passed in that exact moment, but I just think it's one of those situations where you go visit somebody before they pass and maybe she might have passed on some hours later. The next scene would be the funeral. And it threw me off a little bit because I thought it was like the actual funeral. But it might have been. Because I guess she got cremated and they scattered her ashes in the desert.
So, you know, there's, I don't know. So, not everybody has funerals the way we have funerals.
Right.
Some people just, like, show up at the gravesite. Because that's what a lot of people have been doing during this pandemic.
Right.
Like, you just go outside to the gravesite and that's it. But, like, normally we be packing out the church. Then we go to the gravesite. Then we go back to eat. Right. Not everybody does that. Some people just go to the funeral home.
Yeah, and I wasn't necessarily expecting, like, a church. Because, you know, sometimes in horror movies, it will just cut straight to the burial. You know? Yeah. But I think it was just because I believe this movie, they're in Arizona, by the way. So that's why we open in like a canyon. And you get that desert, dry heat vibe. So that's why I was like, is this something that they do in Arizona? Or maybe that was her dying wish that she wanted her ashes spread.
In the canyon.
In the canyon, right. So we cut to another scene. It seems like they're back maybe at their house. We're not really sure. It's not like we spend too much time there. But Jack, who is the father, so Jack Evans and his brother Wallace Evans are having a conversation. And what I got from the conversation is basically Jack, the father, doesn't want to go on this business opportunity that he has because of everything that just happens, which obviously makes sense. Your wife just died.
Why would I leave
my mother
son?
Of your son just died. That's very traumatic. But the thing about it is, if he goes on this business trip, it can potentially change their lives for the better. Exactly. So his brother Wallace is just like, well, how about your son comes and stays with us for the next 2 weeks? We'll take care of him. Remember, I have 2 kids. He doesn't say that, but, you know, he has 2 kids that are Mark's age, and everything will be fine. And then, you know, you'll come back and everything can just go on from there. So that's basically what happens next. And I guess I wasn't paying attention when I first watched it because I must have looked down. I must have been writing in my notes because it changed to winter really quick. And I didn't pick up that we went to Maine. I was like, what the hell is this?
Yeah, so they did a cross-country road trip.
Yeah. And that's what I caught in the next scene because I think he said something about like, how long did he say it took them to get there? Because that's what threw me off.
I missed it, but they started off on a cross-country road trip and ended up in Maine. But before that, he got out. He pulled over. You see that? Remember that part? He pulled over on the side of the road, and then Elijah just took off running in the middle of the desert. Okay, so this is after.
Oh, yeah. Oh.
So this is after the
yes.
the uncle.
I have a note right here. I got you. So this was, like you said, it was right after the scene, and I made a note that he was playing on his gray little Game Boy, and he was playing Bomberman. He was like, so once you're done bombing people over America or something like that, I was like, whoa, wait a minute. Let's cool out on that. But then he has a conversation with him off on the side of the road, and I think this is where I was making a note that Mark, I don't know if I want to say reincarnation. I don't know if that's the word I want to use. But basically, he's telling his dad that his mom's going to come back because she said she would never leave him. And his dad is trying. His dad think he's helping him by trying to like help him cope with the fact that his mom isn't physically coming back. But I think that Mark understands that his mom didn't mean physically. Right. I don't know. It just seems Elijah Wood... You know the way he looks, he just seems like he just understands.
Like most kids. I wrote,
like Noah from The Ring. Yeah. He just like understands.
Well, most kids come with that understanding.
Yeah. I don't know. I just think it could because we watching this in 2020 as well, that we give kids a little more credit.
Well, here's the thing. I wrote this later down in my notes, but most kids, they have like a heightened sense of the world because they actually just came from heaven, so they're more likely to see spirits and hear things because they don't have that tainted view of the world yet. They don't grow up and listen to their parents being like, oh, that's not real. Right. They think they like imaginary friends. Sometimes I'm like, is it really imaginary?
No, that's real. No, I think that's real. I can't wait till we start talking about those kind of movies.
I'm telling you, they're gonna think that I'm crazy. They're gonna be like, Johnny is retarded. Like is she cuckoo? Why does she believe in all this stuff? Y'all gonna hear everything.
We jump cut to a snowy scene. Now we're in Maine, so we made this cross-country trip, as Johnny said. And we get this little ominous scene where they're coming around this curve. It's snowy, as I said. And we see the back headshot of what we would come to know as Henry. And he pops up, and you kind of like get this music cue that something's not right. But the first thing I noticed is that his ears were so red. I'm like, you need to go in the house. Obviously, it's very cold, but I mean, that's not the point. They're used to it. This is a movie. So they show up at their aunt. They show up at Aunt Susan and Uncle Wallace's house, and the family, they're greeting each other. And as they're doing that, this is kind of where we're meeting the rest of our characters for the movie. So, as I said, we meet Aunt Susan, Uncle Wallace. We meet Cousin Connie, which is the youngest sister. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, there's a doll that just flops from, like, a top banister, like the top of the stairs or something. It's like some Michael Myers stuff. It actually looks like...
So, I said, when his homemade mask was giving me Mikael Myers.
Come on, Mikael. Leroy.
It made me laugh out loud. When he popped his head down, I laughed. I was like, what is...
So, Henry comes down the stairs, which is played by Macaulay Culkin. Henry comes downstairs and we see that he has a mask on, and I believe it's paper mache. So he meets Mark, and I think, if I'm correct, I think this is the first time they've ever met. Like, possibly. I don't think they've met. And it makes sense because they stay across country. At first, when I first watched the movie, I was like, why would they not know about each other?
I don't think they met because Susan, she said, oh, wow, I can't believe it's been 10
years. Mm-hmm.
So I don't think they met.
And I'm like, obviously, they were like 8.
12.
Okay, so that makes a lot... Oh, that makes a lot more sense. Thank you, because I had some notes for later on in the movie, but thanks for telling me that. So they're meeting each other, and Henry actually made a mask for Mark. And he was like, oh, so now we can be brothers. Hold that thought, because I have something to say at the end that could have been very good. But he makes a mask for Mark, and he gives it to him and says that we can now be brothers. And as you said, I was just like, I feel like this is going to, like, come back in a weird way. But it really doesn't. Not really. The first note I wrote...
I mean, shoot, your cousins end up being more like your siblings sometimes.
Yeah. So when Henry was walking down the stairs with that mask, in my notes I was like, Henry bad as hell.
Mikael.
And then, no. Wait, that wasn't the part. Actually, it cuts to the next scene and we're at dinner. And it just shoots to the floor. And Henry kicks Mark. And I was like, Henry bad as hell. And then it looks up and they like look at each other. And then Mark kicks Henry back. And I was like, boys are bad as hell. I'm not about to be dealing with that. They too rough. Like, what? And did you see how they was like, have you ever seen giraffes, like, hit each other with their necks? Don't laugh. I was trying to give you a visual if you ain't never seen it. You never seen giraffes
I have,
fight?
but that was funny.
Because that's what they do, guys. I know y'all can't see me, but I had to. When I speak, I'm very visual. Like, I have to show you. So I kind of impersonated a giraffe fighting, and I guess Johnny couldn't handle it. So anyway, they're at dinner and they're eating, and they were eating like lobster, but it makes sense. We're on the East Coast. We do eat like that.
Well, then also Maine.
Yeah, I was like,
Maine
they're
lobster.
in Maine.
So it's so funny because the way he cracked that lobster,
and that's what I was about to say,
reminded me of the first time I tried to crack open a blue crab.
What happened?
I did the exact same thing. I slammed on
But
it.
he was very aggressive, and I said that. I was like, he's be aggressive with the lobster. It's almost like he's done this often, but maybe with something else. Like, I was a little concerned by that. But anyway, we find out that his dad will be leaving for 2 weeks over winter break, as we said. So we see that everything's out of school. They just basically give you all the explanation or exposition that tells you why we here and what's going on. Anyway, it's early in the morning, and Henry is already outside playing. I don't know what time it is, but Mark goes ahead and he wakes up. He heads downstairs. And I believe that he's going to go ahead and join Henry, but his Aunt Susan stops him and says, like, come on, come eat breakfast.
Well, before that, did you peep what was going on in Richard's room?
Oh, yeah. Go ahead.
So he jumps out the bed, and he goes in the hallway, and Richard's door, before he finds out that bedroom was actually his dead little cousin Richard's room. Yeah. The baby mobile or whatever that's hanging from the ceiling is just moving. Yeah. And there's nobody in there. Like, he goes down to the room and looks, and there's nobody in there.
Now, see, I didn't know that yet. Now, obviously, you guys know when we get to this part of the podcast, we're talking as if you've seen the movie. So, if I have to say,
hope you seen
go
it.
back and watch it, then, you know. Anyway, when I first watched the movie, I didn't realize that was his room, because we hadn't seen Connie's room yet. So I'm thinking, like, you know, like when you go to your cousin's house and you might not have been over there, it might be your first time. First time you see something that looks familiar, you just go for it. So I'm thinking, like, maybe he's thinking, like, there and there. Even though he saw Henry, but I was thinking maybe.
So the part that, it wasn't necessarily, like, I didn't really pay attention to whose room it was. Yeah. I just paid attention to the fact that thing was moving. Mobile was moving. And nobody was in there.
I seen it, but I guess it didn't. Because, like I said, I might have been in my notes or something. So he goes downstairs, and Aunt Susan wants him to have breakfast before Henry calls him and basically, like, rushes him outside to play. But it didn't make sense, because I was like, how are you going to make him go eat breakfast, but then as soon as Henry, like, get antsy, you just let him go? Which one is it, ma'am? We come to a tree house that looks very unsafe, very undone. And at first I was like, well, maybe, like,
I wanted a tree house.
I did too, and I never got one, and I still feel away. So I feel like when I have kids, I'm going to give them a tree house, but I'm going to secretly be up in there.
Make sure it's strong enough.
What? I mean, it's wood. It gotta be. If it's like 5 kids in a tree house, that's like,
I'm just saying,
2.5 of us.
Sometimes it's like, how are these tree houses made? Like, oh my gosh. Like, I get it,
the tree.
But at the same time, I'm like, it's kind of creepy, but it's cool.
I mean, you know, somebody know what they're doing.
I'd be scared. Like, especially if you making a homemade. What if my husband ain't do it right and then we all just fall out the tree?
See, you be, no. And people talk about me being the messed up one. It's you. It's all you. That is so crazy.
I think about these things.
Like, I mean, yeah, but no. Like, that's why.
See, we're not going to do Mr. Fix It. We're going to hire someone to do it, because if you try to do it
exactly.
yourself.
So now you ain't got to think about that. So somehow, as, you know, have you ever been at a playground as a kid and you've been climbing one of the plenty obstacle courses or whatever you want to, what do you call those things at the playground? Yeah, the jungle gym. Have you ever been at a playground and you're climbing, like, the jungle gym, and it might be a part that's a little tricky and, like, you can't quite reach it, or maybe you can't, like, pull yourself up? This is, like, the situation in the treehouse. So from the part where you're, like, climbing it to the part that you're actually, like, in the treehouse, you have to pull yourself up. Mm-hmm. So Mark apparently Henry, this is his house, so they've done this 1,000 times. They can do this. Mark is having problems, but we have like a Lion King situation where Mark is like dangling off of the side. And I wrote that in my notes. I was like, what the heck?
And then had the nerve to say, if I let you go,
will you fly?
I was like, sir, now is not the time to be playing games. I'm scared.
All.
Pull me up talking about something you think you could fly.
It didn't just cuts. It was like, I noticed this movie had just like, in the beginning, there were just a lot of like, and now we're here, and now we're here, and now we're here. But I don't know if that was just like a 90s thing or not. It was just like, no. I guess the point was just to show that gradually over time you see that something is wrong with Henry. Because we come to an abandoned building and they're just rummaging around.
Because after he finally pulled him up, they start play fighting or whatever. Yeah. And then they just go on to their next destination.
Yeah, but I mean, you know, boys do that. But as we know, we're watching the movie. We know this is like, I don't know, that was kind of, you know, you already see that Henry has creepy boy vibes. Anyway.
So, the funny thing about it, to me, I didn't get creepy boy vibes yet.
Yeah, really?
I didn't.
When he said, said, if I drop you, will you fly? That's when I was like,
I was like, okay. But at the same time, I was just like, he just wasn't giving it to me yet. Well, okay, I'll get into that later.
We're in the abandoned building, and we see Henry throwing rocks at a window, and one eventually shatters. And this is what made me think of the story I told you guys earlier, because then Mark joins in and starts shattering the windows with him. But Mark is under the assumption that, like, you know, my cousin's doing it, so it's okay for me to do it, you know. And, I mean, now we're old enough and we know that's not okay. That's being a follower. But I didn't know that then. I'm still salty. Anyway, there's a guy that comes out and pretty much scares them, and they take off and they're running down the railroad. And I'm just like, this is how you know this is a different time, because why are you just letting your kids run freely like this? Like, how far were they away from the house? Even throughout the rest of the movie, when we see, like, they're just like, we'll get into it because I don't want to jump ahead, but it's a few times I'm going to bring up that it's just like, are they Sims? They just have free will here?
I mean, I was thinking about that too. Like, at 12, you just randomly show up.
But see, and that's why I forgot that they were 12. I thought they were younger. Mm-hmm. So at 12, I can see you being able to roam
because you're like
around.
Middle school by 12.
But it's still just like, I'm okay. I keep forgetting that they're 12. And it is the 90s. That's what I said.
Yeah, you're middle school at 12, 13. You're middle school.
I still wasn't going on no Rugrat adventures at 12. I ain't started going on Rugrat adventures until college. So anyway.
It's weird,
that's what I wrote in my notes.
A lot of my friends did have Rugrat adventures. I just didn't because I was very sheltered.
But, yeah, and I think that's why. And that's why I said I didn't have them till college.
But like my friends, like I would hear their stories. And they were like, okay, Johnny, let's go ride our bikes here. And I'm like, I can't, I gotta stay in the neighborhood. So, yeah, I gotta stay in the neighborhood. Like, they would ride their bikes to this one park that's about like 5 miles away. Mm-hmm. I couldn't go.
After Mark and Henry take off down the railroad tracks, they come off in the forest. And I think they're like off in like a cemetery setting, I want to say. And Henry has like this super fancy cigarette case, like with a gold lighter.
But first of all, why are you smoking cigarettes at 12 years old? That's the part that tripped me out. Like, you're 12 and you got cigarettes. Like, who are you?
Right. I'm just like, excuse me, sir. First of all, not a cigarette. But anyway, he offers one to Mark. And Mark is just like, those things will give you cancer. To where Henry is like, I mean, you're going to die anyway. And I'm just like, okay, but I don't want to die from that. I mean, there are ways, my friend. Jeez. Oh, so you still wasn't getting creepy boy vibes.
So at that point, you say you're going to die anyway. I'm like, I felt that. Like, I mean, I get it. You are going to die anyway. But he still wasn't giving me creepy boy vibes. Mm-mm. You know what he was giving me?
What?
Home Alone.
And is it just because he's so synonymous with Home Alone that he gave you that?
No, the acting seemed the same to me.
Did it?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll talk about it.
And that's what I put that at the end. Like, to me, the acting seemed the same. Like, because he was home alone and he was grown and acting the way he was doing and, like, ordering a pizza, doing all these pranks, doing all this stuff. Like, the acting kind of...
It just seemed like a dark Home Alone.
Basically.
Okay, got you. Okay, I did get that vibe, but we'll talk about it. As the boys are taking their little smoke break from their escapades, Henry asked if Mark had seen his mom when he died. And as he's asking him, like, as he's going through this conversation with him, you can kind of tell, like, either he's seen something before, because he's seen something, or he's just very...
But then that's when he finally brought up his brother.
And that's what I was about to blend those two together. So I'm glad you said that. So he goes on to talk about, well, yeah... I think Mark asked him, well, how do you know that? Like, why would you say that? And he was like, well, because I know, because when my little brother drowned, he was pale and his lips was blue. But you can see as the conversation goes on that Mark is getting, like, super uncomfortable. And at first I'm like, okay, well, obviously, because nobody wants to talk about their dead mom. But when he drops a bombshell about his brother, you're just like, okay.
And then the thing about it, too, is, like, the conversations were kind of grown for 12.
Yeah.
That's why I was like, that's like gave me a dark Home Alone, because he seemed like how he acted in Home Alone.
Mark asks Henry to stop the conversation about the dead bodies. Afterwards, Henry threatens him and says that he'll throw him... Wait.
He was basically like, leave my mom out of it.
Wait, let me go back. Okay, I see how I wrote this. It should have been an enter.
He said, leave my mom out of this.
After a while, you can see that Mark is getting, like, super uncomfortable with the conversation, and he asks Henry to stop. But Henry threatens to throw him down the well. Like, so they're sitting next to this well where they're taking their little smoke break, I forgot to say. And immediately, Mark just apologizes, because he can tell, like, something's not right. I don't think he's trying to, like, get on his bad side at all. Later on that night, the boys are talking about... Henry apologized to him?
Yeah.
Oh, that's why this note, that makes a lot of sense. So I have a note that says, is he starting to be a charmer? With some question marks. So I was trying to figure out who do I write that about. So thank you.
Yeah, Henry apologized, not Mark.
Later on that night, the boys are talking about their adventure. They're, like, in bed. And Uncle Wallace comes by and he's, like, trying to get them to go to bed. And it was kind of funny here because he was like, okay, boys, not another peep. And you just hear the voice going, peep, 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 peep. I'm like, oh, it's so cute. But then I had to remember that one of these boys is bad as hell. We come outside the next morning, and the boys are just, like, going on their little boy adventures as they do. And all of a sudden, they get chased down by this huge, brolic pit bull.
Yo.
That came out of nowhere.
That dog was scary. Like, that was the one part that scared me. Because it was too based in reality. I like dogs, but I don't like dogs that look rabid. And that dog looked like a rabid dog.
My thing is, I think the dog knew Henry was evil. You know dogs be knowing.
And here's my thing, too. I wouldn't have kept running straight. I would have jumped my ass in the water.
Really?
The dog wouldn't have followed me?
Might have. But
I would take my chances.
You know, some dogs is bold.
I would have jumped right off that bridge. Because at that point, that dog looked like he could run faster than I could. And he looked rabid. So
as the boys get away from the dog by, like, they use a gate to block themselves from the dog. And they come off to a cliff around the side where we see Aunt Susan out on a cliff. And she just, it just seems like she's meditating, just out staring at the water, thinking. And Henry says this is where she comes to clear her mind and think about little Richard. Anyway, we move on, and they come to a shed in the woods. And I'm still just amazed because I'm like, you guys are just letting Henry roam. And, like, it's so many low-key places that this little boy has, even for 12. Like, I know in the 80s, like, these groups of kids had, like, these clubs and these hangouts. But I'm pretty sure their parents knew, like, they were there. I'm pretty sure. Well, no, never mind. Because later, never mind. I'm going to keep that note to myself. Because as I said, this was my first time view, so I just had a lot of questions.
In the 80s and 90s and 70s, before you got cell phones, people just used to go ahead and do whatever they wanted to do. You had
Which is crazy to me.
As long as you came back by the streetlights came on. So when I was 12, I was riding my bike around the neighborhood. At first, I could only stay in the cul-de-sac. Then I can go to the end of the street. Mm-hmm. But then after a while, I started to be able to, like, roam the neighborhood.
I think by the time I was able to roam the neighborhood, I was deep in dance practice. So I was in dance practice at the time I would have been out riding a bike.
Yeah, so middle school.
So maybe I just missed that whole thing.
Yeah, middle school I started roaming the streets. But then, of course, again, you don't have cell phones or anything like that. Because I didn't get a cell phone, I think, until my 8th grade year.
I had one in 6th grade, boo.
Yeah, I didn't have one.
But like I said, I was staying after school, so they needed to.
Yeah, they didn't give me one till 8th grade. So you could literally just do whatever you wanted, and then you just as long as you just came home by the time the street lights came on, that was the rule.
That's so bad.
When the street lights come on, you better be in this house.
The boys go into Henry's shed in the woods, and this is where Henry shows Mark that he has like this gun contraption that he made, which definitely is going to give you Home Alone vibes. Mark asks Henry not to shoot at this cat that they're playing target practice with, but give him a scare, which we can see that Henry like secretly wants to shoot the cat, but fortunately they don't kill the cat. But you can see how strong that this gun is by the way it pins to the tree. With
rusty nails
and screws.
And then the cat didn't even move. I was like,
at all. I was like, what type of cat is this? I mean, like, I know cats are like buttholes. I don't have a cat. I've had a cat before when I was very young, but I'm like, no, that cat would have at least, like, chasséed away or something. Anyway. Our next scene we see that Mark is in therapy, but as any kid would be in this situation, he really doesn't have a lot to say to the therapist, who is Miss Davenport. And Mark he lets her know that he thinks that he let someone die. So she's trying to, like, uncover what does he mean by that.
Yeah. I don't really like the therapist, but we'll get into that later.
She wasn't too helpful.
Yeah, we'll get into that later.
Later on that night, Mark wakes up and he thinks that he sees his mom's walking down the stairs, but to his surprise, it's really just Aunt Susan. They have a little heart-to-heart and he lets her know that he thinks that he sees his mom's spirit in her. I don't know if he necessarily says in her, but he thinks like he's feeling his mom's spirit around him, basically. Then the camera pans over to let us know that Henry is getting a little jelly because Mark is snuggling with his mommy. And this actually does kind of come back in the movie, but I think they should have did a little bit more with that. And I'll talk about it later. So next scene we come to, we have Mark and Connie, little cousins.
Was that the scene where he came down the steps and was like, Mom?
Not yet, because that happens a few times. We have a few stair scenes in this movie, but I don't think that happens yet. I think he just watches.
Okay.
Was this when they were in the living room? I think that was the part where he comes down. I think that was the part with the photo frames, and they were talking about Richard.
Okay, yeah, that was the living room. Okay.
The next day, we have Mark and Connie together, and they're putting together puzzles until Henry, once again, gets jealous and separates them. So they head out to the woods, and they don't let Connie come with them. You know, big brother stuff. Little sister can't come. And once again, they're playing with that little gun that they were playing target with in the woods yesterday. And Mark is like, you know, shoot this sign or shoot this tree. And Henry's like, no, I don't want to do that. And we see the dog that, you know, chased after them the other day. And Henry shoots the dog.
He ain't had to kill the dog, though. He ain't had to. That kind of hurt my heart with the way the dog said, ah!
I'm like, you literally could have, like, I don't even agree with shooting at animals unless it's trying to hurt you. Like, the dog didn't even know they were there. Anyway. That sucked all the energy out the room. We see the boys carrying the dog's body, and they throw it down the same well that Henry threatened to throw Mark down. This is also where it gets a little creepy because Henry is singing like the funeral procession song.
Taps.
Yeah, I'm like... And Mark is like, stop. And he just... And you still didn't get creepy boy vibes. Are you kidding me, Johnny?
He gave me deranged.
No.
But not creepy.
Next scene is where
he gave me basically future serial killer, like deranged. But he didn't give me creepy.
No.
There's a difference.
Absolutely not. Anyway. We're back in the house, and Mark is just, you know, wandering through the house as you do, where he comes across a few pictures, and he sees one of his mom and him when he was younger. So he's looking at it, but of course, when you pick up one photo frame, all the rest of them got to freaking fall down. I wrote that in my notes because Apparently this happens to me way too much. Aunt Susan comes in and joins him, and as they're like picking up the photo frames, they pick up one of baby Richard, and he asks, like, is this Richard? And they have another little heart-to-heart, and what happens, guys? Henry comes in and whisks Marks away once again to the clubhouse, and he apologized for the dog, and he just says it was an accident and that he has a friend for Mark to meet. And I'm just like, you're just being a little charmer again. Like, why would you even go with him?
I mean, at this point, you ain't got nothing else to do.
Play with Connie. Connie is there. You have so much you can do.
She was cute too as a kid.
Exactly. Anyway,
I love the fact that they actually used Macaulay's real sister.
Mm-hmm. And Richard, the baby. Because when I looked at the picture, I was like, they do look alike. But
yeah,
it made sense once I looked at the cast and stuff. So we go on back to the wooden shed where we meet Mr. Highway, which is basically a paper mache dog. Paper mache dog.
Mr. Highway.
This paper mache doll, which I guess for John A, that's a win. It looks like Michael, kind of. It actually looks like...
It didn't look like Michael.
I gotta show you. Anyway, they take the dog to the top of a highway viaduct, and they're just having...
Which kind of made sense as to why they called him Mr. Highway after this scene.
Yeah, I
first, why did they name him Mr. Highway? Okay.
Really? I kind of seen that coming. Like, when I seen that it was like a stuffed person, I seen that coming. I've never seen that scene, even though I had seen mentions of the good son. But I kind of seen that one coming. They take Mr. Highway to the top of a highway viaduct, and they begin, Henry began explaining how Mr. Highway is like suicidal, and I'm just like, hold it, stop.
I'm telling you, he didn't give me creepy. He gave me deranged future serial killer. Because I listen to I watch a lot of true crime mukbangs, and when I just like
okay,
I just like listening to the story. I really never watch. I don't be watching them eat. I just like
you
listening
can block
to the story.
that out.
It doesn't bother me because it's not like an ASMR. It's not like Be Love.
Ew.
The way this girl eat is not like Be Love. Okay. But when she goes into the background of because when she talks about true crime stories, she doesn't just talk about the crime itself. She goes into the childhood. She goes into all the nitty gritty details. And so what Henry was giving me was future serial killer, because he was doing all the markings and makings of a future serial killer, killing animals, being obsessed with death, all that stuff. So, and that's what a lot of serial killers do. Yeah, he was giving me future serial killer vibes. I'm telling you, it's those true crime things. I'm telling you, I've listened to so many origin stories of killers that he just fit the profile.
I see it's from your side, but it's still creep boy. Anyway, as they sit on top of the viaduct, Henry begins to explain that Mr. Highway is very suicidal. And this is just very unnerving to hear a kid just talk about. And the way he goes about... Macaulay Culkin's acting is very good, but I will say, as I see more of his movies as a child, it can be a little bit one-sided. So I do see what you mean there. But anyway, he goes to I don't know why I'm laughing. Uncomfortable things make me laugh. So I'm not laughing because it's funny. I'm just uncomfortable. Henry pushes Mr. Highway off of the top of the viaduct, and he just lands down there, but there's like an RV coming towards it, which tries to swerve and misses it, and it causes like a 10-car pileup. So Henry just smiles as this whole thing is happening. Like, Mark is already taken off because he's like, I didn't know that you were going to do this. Like, I don't know what Mark thought was about to happen.
But based off of his face, he going to need some more therapy.
Right. So he just takes off running. And the boys run and they go hide under another bridge. And this is where we see the police pass under them. And Mark and Henry, they get into a little bit of a disagreement, to where Henry basically tells him, well, you can't tell on me because you were there too. If anybody saw us, they saw you with me too. So you would basically go down if you tell on me. So He's being very manipulative here. And this is also where Mark is like, well, why did you do this? Like, why are you doing this? And Henry's like, well, once you realize you can do anything, you're free. You can fly. Nobody can touch you. You can really do anything.
Telling you. Future serial killer.
immediately told an adult? Like, I don't know.
Well, you see what happened when he decided to tell an adult?
Exactly, I see, but I would have had to tell somebody else, somebody that don't know us. Like, absolutely not. Meanwhile, back at home, the girls are prepping dinner, and this is where we actually get the news report that we see that there was a 10-car accident. Luckily, no one died, but there were 4 people that had to go to the hospital. And this is where Mark overhears the news, and this is where he goes, like you said.
Well, he was going to the kitchen to tell, and then, like, once he saw the commercial, he was actually going into the kitchen to say something. But then Henry popped up and was like, yeah, nah, if you tell, they're not going to believe you. And then he actually yelled out and was like, hey, Mark has to tell you something.
And this is where Henry continues to go further. And he was like, well, I don't know. He's been acting strange lately. So you see Henry is already kind of like
being a manipulator,
playing his parents to think like something is wrong with Mark. And you wouldn't, as a parent, I can see how it can work, because when you do have a kid that's coming to stay with you, especially in that situation, you know, they probably are uncomfortable and things like that. So they might do some things to act out. But
he also just dealt with a loss. So he was probably still grieving too from the parents' perspective. But yeah, future serial killer, deranged, manipulative.
So Henry comes upstairs to the boys' room, and he's basically getting into Mark a little bit more before Connie comes in and lets them know that they're going to be going ice skating tomorrow. But I guess that Henry didn't like that, because Henry tells Connie that she's basically not supposed to be in his room. You know how boys are territorial over their rooms. But he takes it further.
But you're not doing anything.
And tries to pull her ears off. Like, but see, at first I was like, okay, brothers and sisters do this. But then I remember we were talking about Henry, and I'm like, absolutely, like, somebody has to stop this. Which Mark comes and tackles him, and they get into a little scuffle. Connie runs off and brings Mom back to let them know that they're arguing and they're fighting. But Mom, Henry plays it off. Exactly. I'm like, girl, come on now. Which I'm glad she did it in this case, but still. Aunt Susan comes up, and anytime, I'm sorry, but every time she pops up on the scene, it's just like she's in a commercial. Like, she just pops up like this. I know you guys can't see me, but I swear, if you've seen the movie,
a Pantene commercial.
Yeah, like Pantene. She's in a Pantene commercial. She's in a catalog commercial. Like, just
maybe it's CoverGirl. No,
yes, Maybelline. Like, just all that. Anyway, Henry flips the script once again to let the mom know, like, they were just playing a game. At this point, Mark is pretty scared of him, like, because he knows that he has everybody wrapped around his finger. So there has to be a different way that he has to get to somebody to make things make sense. Mark misses therapy the next day, and Miss Davenport, which is a therapist, comes to seek him, and they talk about evil and how there's a reason for everything. But Miss Davenport tells Mark that she doesn't necessarily believe in evil.
What kind of therapist doesn't believe in evil? You not gonna be my therapist.
Anyway, low key, what happens now is Miss Davenport thinks that Mark is talking about himself, but just saying that he's talking about another friend. Later on, Uncle Jack calls, and Henry answers the phone and says that Mark isn't around, although he's playing right outside. And I was trying to think, was this gonna... But see, I was trying to think, like, was this gonna come back in some type of way or what? But it kind of does. So keep a tab on that. We come to Uncle Wallace and Aunt Susan coming down to find Henry, and they let him know that they're gonna go on a date night, and they're gonna leave the boys at home by themselves with Connie. And I'm like, at first, I was like, what do you mean you're about to leave them by themselves? But I forget. It's 2 12-year-olds. That makes sense. I was home by myself around the age of 9, but it was just me.
That's all I was going to say. What do you mean, home alone? Like, what?
It was just me. And I think, like I said, I kept forgetting that they were 12. Like, you know, for some reason, I wasn't seeing 12-year-olds. I was seeing 8-year-olds. And 8-year-old boys at that. Like, 8-year-old girls, I would leave 2 8-year-old girls at home by themselves before I left 2 8-year-old boys.
They were 12, yeah.
But now that I know they're 12...
Middle school, during the summer, I was staying at home by myself.
No, I was alone younger than that, but still, it's just 2 boys. And then, like, the way you've just been seeing them play together over the last few days, would you really leave them alone? No. I mean, of course, no, they didn't know that they was doing all of this stuff. No, they need to stop all of that. Anyway, At dinner, Henry lies to his parents and claims that Mark wants to move into Richard's old room, despite Mark constantly telling him like he's lying. He's like, no, I didn't say this. He's making this up. But this triggers Susan a little bit because obviously she lost a child. She's not ready to let go because, as we saw, the room is in pristine condition, as if somebody actually still sleeps in that room. So Aunt Susan dismisses herself and she goes into Richard's room, and this is where Henry joins her, trying to be a charmer again, let his mom know that, you know, I got your back, mommy, I'm here for you, grabbing her hand, doing that Rhoda stuff. Here we go.
Sociopath.
So the adults head out on their date, and this is where Connie tells Mark that they're going to play hide and seek. But, okay, I think I've done this before. We shut the lights off when we were by ourselves.
No.
I think we have.
Mm-mm.
I don't think we shut the lights off, like, in the entire house, like the power. But I'm talking about, like, the switches.
Mm-mm. I couldn't. I was too scared.
No. But see, it was, when we were doing this, it was a group of us. It was probably like 8 of us playing, to be fair. So before shutting off the power, Henry tells Mark that he better find Connie before he does. So they have this scene where they're just, and I thought, because like I said, it's first time watching the movie, I thought that this was about to be like the third act. Like this was about to be going for broke, just like a whole bunch of stuff happened. But it turns out not to be. What happens is Mark and Henry catch up with each other, and they give Henry like this creepy boy scene where he flicks the flashlight under his face and he's like, what do you think this is, Mark? A game? Right, he should have just evil laughed right there. And that's why I was saying it was just so the creepy kid vibes were so overdone in this movie for me.
Maybe that's why it just wasn't hitting for me.
Yeah, it was just so
was
overdone. It was really overdone. Anyway, I know that's why probably this episode is probably going to seem like we're just literally telling you what happens, because it's like that's all we really can do. Anyway, they end up finding, Henry end up finding Connie, but he doesn't hurt her. It's just basically playing with her. But basically, you know, he's trying to get at Mark and just make him go crazy. Connie ends up switching hiding spot, but it's found by Henry. In the end, when Mark finds them, they're just playing with each other, but Mark doesn't know this. So this is where Connie wants to play again, but Mark is trying to talk her out of and just like, let me read you a story, let's go to bed, which they do, and they're reading Madeline. Did you notice that?
Yeah.
That was like so
I had
cute.
that book.
So Henry tries to go in, and Mark is trying to block him because he's just like, she's not safe around you, and I don't want you around her. Kind of like he's the big brother and Henry's the cousin, if you think about it that way. So Henry's like, I want to put my kid sister to sleep. You can't watch her all night, which Mark does, and he sleeps there and wakes up there in the morning.
And she wasn't there.
And she, yeah, right, exactly. Like, how exactly? We wake up the next morning, and Mark gets up. Connie's gone. He's looking for her, and this is where he finds Aunt Susan and Uncle Wallace. And once again, Aunt Susan is giving her best infomercial cry. And she doesn't let Mark know, but she says that the kids are out at the ice rink, and this is where Mark takes off because he knows something wrong. We shoot to the ice rink, and this is where we see it's a lot of people there. And when I seen there was a lot of people there, I was like, oh, okay, well, but I forgot we're in a thriller horror movie, so of course something has to go wrong. We cut to this scene of Connie and Henry. They're skating around the ice rink, and as we get shots, we're seeing shots of the whole scenery. We're seeing like people at the ice rink, we're seeing Connie, we're seeing people at the ice rink, we see Henry, we see caution tape, we see Henry, we see caution tape, we see Connie. Like, it's just going very, very fast, but you kind of get the sense that Henry is gonna go so fast that he slings Connie past the caution tape into the thin ice. And it kind of movie logic, and I know we had to have movie logic, but how does a little girl crack thin ice, but two grown men can get on the same thin ice and pull her out and then not crack?
Maybe he was on a different portion, because at that point she was underneath the water.
She was. But see, okay, now I know I jumped a little bit, but we already know how this goes. Henry didn't try to help her at all.
I can't believe it, because of course serial killer vibes, but I can't believe he's just gonna let her die. Like, he just, oh my god.
But see, what he did was,
he stuck his hand up there to make it look like.
Right. Not fortunately, but from the angle of where he was as opposed to where the crowd was behind the barrier, it looked like he was trying to help. But all he said, like John said, all he was doing was just...
He just had his arm out for her to make it look like he was helping, but he was like inches away. His hand was inches away from hers, and she's poor girl.
He was probably low key
Connie,
like pulling it back.
She was like, "Henry, help me! Henry, help me!"
I know,
poor little girl.
Face. Anyway, they get to the hospital. Luckily, Connie turns out okay, but she's gonna have to stay in the hospital for a little bit. So we see Suzanne back at the cliff, and they keep showing the cliff. So obviously, you know something is about to happen with
At this point, I was like, if Elijah don't open his mouth, I'm gonna be pissed. And then at that point, I was convinced that Macaulay done killed baby Richard. That's the point I realized that he killed her.
Really?
Killed Richard. Yeah.
I picked that up before then.
It took me that long.
I picked that up way before then. So at the cliff, this is where, as John A. says, this is where Mark tells Susan that Henry is basically evil, and Susan can't take it. She slaps Mark, but then she immediately hugs him because I guess her emotions
First
just
of
might
all,
get the best of her.
If I'm telling you the truth, don't be slapping me because you don't want to believe the truth. Like, how you gonna slap me and then hug me? I'm trying to help you out.
I think she didn't. I think when she realized she slapped him, But yeah, no, that's confusing. Don't be doing that. Anyway, after all this happens, we cut back to the hospital, and Henry just pops up, and he's over Connie, and you already know.
He was reaching for that pillow.
Yes, you already know he's going to plan to suffocate her, which gave me strong other badass kid vibes that we'll talk about later. Which is crazy. I like how all these movies just kind of restore this rhetoric. But anyway, Susan luckily is in the corner of the room and stops Henry right before he suffocates her. He doesn't quite do it yet, but we as the audience, we know that's where the vibe was going.
She was reaching for the pillow, and then she was going to sit up there and pop him and say, "Henry, what are you doing here?" with the confused voice. Like, girl. Moms in scary movies annoy me.
So you think at 12 kids should be just popping up at hospitals? Because I have a note about that too.
Well, it depends. Okay, so it's two different logics for that. You have to think they're probably in a small town.
And I thought that.
So he might have just popped up.
Anyway. I mean,
life in small towns are different than life in metropolitan areas.
I'll go with it. After this scene, we see Marcus calling his dad, and he's trying to tell him, like, yo, like, this ain't right. Nobody's listening to me. And his dad tells him, go to Mrs. Davenport and tell her everything that he told her. Well, he told him. And of course, when he goes sees Mrs. Davenport, who else is there but Henry? Henry has already sunk his little claws into Mrs. Davenport. And Mrs. Davenport is just going along with it. And after Mark realizes he can't trust her, he leaves. And Henry continues to dig his claws into Mrs. Davenport by saying he's worried about Henry and that he's acting different and he thinks something might be really wrong with him. And I don't know how this happens, but somehow they meet up at the treehouse. And this is where Mark is at the treehouse and Henry comes and joins him. That's how it happens. And he's like, you missed a great therapy session. You could have really learned something today. And
I ain't trust that therapist from the moment she said she didn't believe in evil.
Mark is just like, why are you doing, like, Mark is very confused at this point, and he's just telling him, like, I'm not going to let you hurt my mom. Because at this point, we know that Mark thinks that Susan has the spirit of his mother inside of him, or some type of maternal role, I can say. I guess that's how I took that. In this scene, this is where I knew that Henry was just going to go for broke here, where he was, like, twisting the story onto Mark and saying that I'm going to blame you for all of this. And when Mark triggered him saying that this was his mom, Henry was like, no, your mom's maggot food.
That part actually made me laugh. Because I was like,
you should have pushed him out the treehouse.
How you gonna call my mom maggot food? But at the same time, it was kind of funny, just a little bit.
So Mark decides to leave, and as he's leaving, Henry stops him, and he just looks at him, and he goes, don't fuck with me. And I'm just like,
serial killer, deranged, like, don't fuck with me.
Meanwhile, Susan finds... Meanwhile, later on that night, we have Mark downstairs. I'm not sure what really he was doing.
Before that, like literally before that, he convinced him that... Because he came downstairs for a snack. Mm-hmm. And Henry was waiting in the dark. And then in that moment, he kind of like alluded to the fact that he poisoned the food. And then when he realized that, oh my God, he might have poisoned the food, Mark started taking all the food out of the fridge and shoving it down the garbage disposal. And so the mom, Susan, comes in there and she's like, oh my God, no, Mark, stop. And she's like, no, he's trying to kill you. He's going to poison you. And so she like grabs him and tries to pull him away. And she's like, stop, it's okay.
The next day, this girl, melodramatic. Anyway, the next day, Susan stumbles upon Henry's shed and looks around. She finds a rubber duck that used to belong to Richard, and that's when she starts putting everything together. Finally, Henry.
Before we go into that, I actually put in my notes that at this point, the mom started to piss me off a little bit because I don't like it when adults don't believe children. Half the time, their imagination really isn't purely imagination. It's based in truth. Like, if your child is saying, I see something standing in the corner, I'm going to believe it. Because, like I said earlier, y'all just left heaven, so you can see the stuff we can't see because you're not tainted by the world yet. Mm-hmm. And when kids act out, like, quote-unquote, act out, it's for a reason. They don't be doing it just for the hell of it. It's normally because something happened to cause their outburst.
Right.
And the adults just weren't seeing it. And I think that's what makes me mad about, like, most thriller and horror movies, because adults just don't listen to kids. Oh, it's just your imagination. Or, oh, it's nothing. Like...
Right.
This is why kids need therapy when they grow up, because half the time your parents don't believe what you're saying.
Right. This is when Henry walks in and he has like a wooden block. And I'm like, oh, what the freak is he doing with this block? But it doesn't go anywhere. So this is where Susan kind of confronts him and asks him, like, this is Richard's duck, and you know I was looking for this, and you've had it this whole time. To where Henry says it used to be mine before it was his. So I'm like, oh, I see what this is. He wants to be like the only one. Like, Connie he did try to get rid of Connie. But
I think it was more off of, like, he probably felt like he was being replaced by Richard.
Yeah,
like
he's a boy.
Yeah, like with Connie, it's
she's
like,
a girl.
You're a girl. I don't really care.
Mm-hmm.
But with the boy, it's like when another boy comes along.
Because even with Mark coming in, it feels like another boy's coming up and they're giving him all his attention. So... they're fighting over this duck, and Henry finally takes a hold of it, and he rushes off to the wells and chucks the duck down the well, which...
Okay, so this scene finally gave me a little something.
Okay.
It reminded me of Rhoda and that dang on penmanship award.
Jesus.
But it's mine.
Right.
So now that scene, he finally gave me
more emotion.
Of what I needed the whole movie.
Mm-hmm.
But then also, what was the point? Because you just took it, then ran it, and threw it down the well. Like, what was the point?
Yeah, and that's why I was like, it kind of like, I thought that was going to be...
At least with Rhoda, she went to go find the reward after her mother threw it away.
It came back.
Versus...
this went nowhere.
Yeah.
Anyway. Find Henry, like, in the mirror, and he's
practicing
just...
crying. Like a creep.
Yeah. Remember
More
when...
sociopath.
Remember when girls used to take pictures of them crying and post it on MySpace? Showing our age again.
MySpace.
Anyway.
I miss MySpace.
Because
some people need to get their egos popped a little bit. Top 8, top 16, top 32.
So the boys end up having a conversation to where Mark just figures he's not about to be no punk no more. And he pulls a pair of scissors on Henry. He holds it up to his neck. And Henry is like, go ahead, push it in. You're going to have to push hard. And the blood is squirt right across the room.
And that actually made me mad because it's like, now you don't push Elijah to act like he crazy.
Yeah. And I'm just like, poor thing. See, this is how kids get warped. Anyway, Uncle Wallace comes in on them and he stops the boys. And this is where Uncle Wallace locks Mark up in his office. And Mark is like losing it because he's trying to make everybody understand, like, Henry is crazy and he's going to hurt us. Like, we have to do something about this.
Yeah, I did not like the fact that Henry was trying to paint Mark as the crazy one. Like,
yeah, but the thing is, I don't like
poor
the fact
Frodo.
that it was working.
Sorry. Shout out to Lord of the Rings.
So Aunt Susan comes back from her happy place, and Mark is trying to get her attention from the office, but obviously she can't hear him. But, of course, Henry comes in just in time, and Susan, luckily, is like, no, we're not going to do this. Like, we're about to have a conversation. We're going to talk. To where Henry is like, okay, well, let's go on a walk like we used to, like old times. And Mark is like, no, I can't let you guys do this. But obviously, like I said, they can't hear him. And I'm sorry, boo. He Chris Browns the window. He takes a chair to it.
But not a car. Sorry. But I like that part. I was like, yes, you better think on your feet and bust them windows and hop out.
Exactly. So he gets out. At that time, it was, of course, right on time. This is where Uncle Wallace and therapist Davenport come, and they try to pull him in. But, of course, he gets away.
It cuts to the woods where they're walking and talking.
Susan and Henry are talking, and Susan again asks Henry about this duck and about Richard, and basically just asks, like, did you kill your brother? And Henry's like, okay, and what if I did? And Susan's like, well, we'll get you help. And apparently,
one of those places.
yeah, Henry doesn't like the way that sounds. He doesn't want to be seen as one of those people that needs to be in an institution, and he runs off. So as he runs off,
as me, I'm like, yes, I am going to send you to one of those places. Like,
it's,
what?
It's okay. You'll be better in the end. Hopefully, we hope. We can pray. Henry runs off, and Susan follows him to where Susan believes that he might have fallen off of a cliff.
Pump fake.
Okay.
And pushed her
ankles.
butt right on off that cliff.
You should have known him better, Susan.
She fell, but then landed on like a branch and was holding onto the branch. And then that's when Mark comes up and they start fighting and tussling on the edge of the cliff, which actually gave me a little bit of anxiety because
you have kids on this jagged rock rolling around. Susan's climbing her way back up once again like she's in a freaking commercial.
But she was a G though, because I don't know if I could have pulled myself back up that cliff.
Yeah, it wasn't like it was the tree house to where it was like actual.
Like, what were you climbing on?
Yeah, it was like a goat. Oh, I guess she was the goat in that situation. Anyway, we have Mark and Henry. They're fighting. And before Mark pops up, did you see that Henry was about to like throw a rock at her?
Yeah.
To knock her down even further?
Yeah.
So as the boys are fighting, we have Susan climbing up. And of course, as the boys fall off the cliff, Susan gets up in enough time to grab both boys. She's trying to pull both of them up. But as we see, like, she's not strong enough to pull both of the boys up. And I wasn't sure. I was thinking that this could have went one of many ways. Yeah. I was thinking, like, the dad and Miss Davenport were going to come and pull them both all up to safety.
That's what I was thinking.
But what ends up happening, to our surprise, people, she's telling the boys to try to like hold on and kind of climb up her arms, and she's trying to hold herself down as best as she can. Henry is just like, Mom, help me. I need your other hand. I love you. Meanwhile, Mark, he's just quiet. He's just trying to like concentrate. Every now and then he might say Aunt Susan, but he's just trying to concentrate.
Please.
And guys, wouldn't you know, Aunt Susan lets go of Henry and he falls to his death. And y'all, we see the body.
Yeah, in the water. I definitely did not expect her to let Henry go.
I didn't.
But I'm glad she did. Because, first of all, as Mark's dad, my wife just died. I have to go on a business trip. I leave my child with you. Now, my child's dead. So now I done lost my wife and my son within a 2-week period.
I mean, and technically my brother at that point, because it's going to be a minute.
Yeah.
You're going to feel it's going to be some type of something there.
Yeah.
Towards.
Like, I just lost my wife, I leave my child with you and my crazy ass nephew, and now my child dead too.
And my child was telling y'all that he was doing stuff. Exactly. So it was very shocking to see that they dropped Henry. And I mean, it was very shocking that they showed the body like on the rock, and then you see like it washes the body away.
I mean, we in the 90s now, so.
I mean, yeah, but a kid is still a kid. They wasn't killing kids like that just yet. Like, it would be a shocker every now and then. Like, now they killing kids like it's candy on Halloween.
Yeah.
But then it was still shocking to see like a kid to get killed. Like, maybe if he would have ended up going to jail, that would have been proper for that.
Yeah.
Or like if they didn't show the body at all. The fact that they showed the body was the thing.
Yeah.
Like, you just see him flopping on the rock, and then and the rock is all bloody.
See, I couldn't see. That's the part that like kind of confused me a little bit, because I was looking like, is that blood or is that just the rock wet?
I think it was blood. Because remember, we kept seeing scenes of how, I guess they were trying to show us how far of a drop it was.
Yeah.
Because I was also wondering, like, if they fell, would they survive? Would they just be bruised up? But
with all them rocks?
Those rocks at the bottom were pretty big. I mean, when she got caught by the branch, I feel like if she had a fell from there, she might have just had like a broken bone or something, because she was relatively closer.
Yeah, and it was shallow too. So
Yeah.
At that point, woof.
It basically takes us back to the beginning of the movie, where we see Mark back in Arizona in the canyon, and he's kind of like observing and having a moment with himself, and he's having a voiceover moment where he's like, Henry's gone, the family is safe, but I've always wondered, why did Aunt Susan save me? Like, if she had a do-over, would she make the same choice again? But I know I would never have the strength to ask her. And that, my friend, is how this ride ends. So, Janae.
Meh.
Girl, I guess it would be nice of us if we at least showed our presence in this souvenir shop.
I don't even want a souvenir.
It seems you survived. Well, before you go, join us in the souvenir shop.
Well, I mean, the posters are kind of nice. Kinda. Okay, so when I say kind of nice, you gotta be nice, okay? There are actually a lot of posters for The Good Son that they have floating around. One of them, the main one that you'll see, is one of Macaulay Culkin. I kind of like it because they kind of make him look innocent. Like, you don't know what type of movie this is going to be. And this is definitely total 90s to have, like, the airbrush floating picture in the third left corner with the vast background and then the title in the bottom.
Like, what's it called?
What?
His face gives me Home Alone.
Yeah, I'm saying it doesn't give you evil kid vibes. So like, you don't know what type of...
So this was the
cover.
That was the cover of when I watched it last night. Mm-hmm. This was the cover that they had.
This was the cover I got. But see, now one I really do like. I do like this black and white cover. It gives me Rhoda vibes. And it's just a close-up on Macaulay Culkin's face. But you only see his left eye. You can see that it's green. And it says The Good Son. At the top, it says Evil Has Many Faces. Now, one I don't like. They were very lazy here. There's another promo poster where it's the same picture of Macaulay Culkin on the very first poster we talked about. But you can tell they just minimized his picture to put him behind the tree, to make it look like he's peeking behind the tree. I don't think there are any other posters in the shop. It's just different renditions of those four.
The poster that I said that I had liked, well, the one that I had saw, is like all black. Macaulay is squinting, looking towards the right on the left-hand side of the screen. On the poster. The Good Son is in the top right, and then you have a picture of Elijah Wood.
This one?
No, it's this one.
Let me see. Oh, I thought you meant it was like closer to his face. Okay, keep going.
And then you have a picture of Elijah Wood, small, underneath the title, and then below it says Evil Has Many Faces, and then below that is a picture of the house, and it looks like the house on the hill.
This movie has a 6.4 out of 10 on IMDb, a 26% rating on Rotten Tomatoes, and a 45% on Metacritic. Janae.
Sorry.
On a scale of 1 to 100, what do you rate The Good Son?
I give it a 70.
A 70?
Yeah.
That's high.
I didn't want to be... Because I really wanted to give it a 50, but
I'm giving it a 54. Because, for Macaulay Culkin to be in it and Elijah Wood to be in it, it should be way better. For it to be a $17 million budget, it should be way better.
I'm going to give it a 50.
Yeah, let's be honest.
So, yeah. So, for me... Wait, I have to burp. Excuse me. Sorry. Okay. I'm going to give it a 50. For me, like I was saying earlier, Henry didn't really give me sociopath or psychopath for more than half of the movie. He wasn't even giving me creepy child, more like disturbed child, like, slightly off, but
Yeah, it just, like I said, people, I'm sorry. I know this is a horror podcast. This is episode 2, and it was my fault, but it's okay. We're gonna do bad horror movies all the time.
But yeah, I think it's also because, like I said, I watched too much true crime. So all I can think of was the fact that he just had the makings of being a future serial killer.
It was. Our next ride for next week
is gonna be a fun ride. You know what it gave me?
What?
I'm trying to think of a roller. Have you been to Six Flags America? Mm-hmm. Have you been to what? I'm trying to think of the name of the ride where it's like.
What, the giant drop? Because that definitely was not a giant drop.
No. Okay. I want to say it gives me Superman. Only because Superman is okay until they get to that one point where it just like goes in a circle at the end.
Yeah, this did keep going in circles. Okay, I want off this ride. Guys,
it gave me Superman.
That was The Good Son. Next week, we will be riding the ride known as Alice, Sweet Alice. And I love this movie. I can't wait till we review it. Have you seen it before? Okay, guys, it's Johnny's first time watching Alice, Sweet Alice. So we'll see you guys next week at the meetup. Bye.
Bye, y'all.